coming up on our broadcast tonight. Cutting red tape. The Korean government unveils plans to lift a series of regulations covering drones, the biotech industry, autonomous vehicles, among others. More than 140 regulations to be removed. We have the details. Korea commemorates the May 18th pro-democracy movement, 36 years since hundreds of people perished standing up for democracy in this country. And Japanese carmaker Suzuki says it's found discrepancies in its fuel and emissions testing, but denies cheating. It comes after Mitsubishi's admission last month that it had falsified fuel economy data for its vehicles. NEWSCENTER begins right now. It's 9 in Washington, 2 in London, and 10 on a Wednesday evening here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to our viewers all across the globe. You're watching Arirang News Center. Cutting red tape and a whole lot of them. The President Park Geun-hye administration announced a package of deregulation policies today, specifically aimed at fostering future growth engines. First, our Song Ji-sun with an overview of the policies unveiled today.
Groundbreaking, innovative policies. That's how President Park Geun-hye described her goals for reforming the regulations hindering new growth engines at the 5th Ministerial Deregulation meeting on Friday at the presidential office.
규제 개혁이야말로 돈 안 들이고도 민간의 창의와 투자를 극대화하고 사안별로 맞춤형 해결이 가능한 일석삼조의 효과를 가진 가장 효과적인 대책입니다. 특히 신산업 성장을 가로막는 핵심적인 규제들은 선제적이고 과감하게 철폐해야만 우리 경제가 한 단계 더 도약할 수가 있습니다.
The Park administration has continuously pledged to remove as many regulations as possible, with the exception of those deemed absolutely necessary. To ensure Korea does not lag behind in the global market, the administration will lower the barriers for new industries to levels similar to those in most advanced countries. Developing drones and road testing autonomous vehicles will now become much easier. The government will also take preemptive deregulatory measures to boost economic sentiment and improve the synergy between the regional and central governments to better reflect demand from the field. With nearly 300 deregulatory tasks submitted by businesses expected to be addressed over the next 2 months, the government expects to save some $3 billion and create 13,000 new jobs in the process. President Park stressed that timing and speed are key to reform drives, as there can be no new growth engines and no job creation without deregulation. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
So drastic deregulation in new growth engines, particularly drones, biotech, the new industries, and the ICT sector. Let's dig a little deeper. Now our tech correspondent reports the industries may welcome the changes. Here's Kim Ji-yeon.
The government is planning to eliminate regulations on goods and services related to the ICT convergence sector to match the level of freedom in developed countries. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport says autonomous vehicles will be able to operate anywhere across the nation on roads designated for testing and demonstration. Also, it will apply a negative listing approach to drones for commercial use, meaning it will allow the use of drones that don't interfere with military operations or that could pose a risk to public safety.
Already, developed countries have decisively jumped into the drone industry and have acquired a lot of the technology, so we have to speed up innovation in this field too.
In the Internet of Things sector, the ICT Ministry agreed to allow a higher output of electromagnetic frequencies by 20 times the current level to 200 milliwatts. The ministry says the changes will lower costs for companies by a third and help them build exclusive IoT network connectivity. By June, the ICT Ministry says it will come up with clear guidelines in cooperation with the Interior Ministry, the Korea Communications Commission, and the Financial Services Commission on how big data companies should handle personal information. The new guidelines will no longer require companies to get an individual's approval for the collection of personal information, but they are expected to impose higher security standards on the companies with regard to how they should handle and store the data. The ICT Ministry also says it's upgrading its public database to help companies providing offline services online, starting with the National Police Agency's database on driver's licenses of chauffeurs. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Nurturing the biomedical industry is another fine point of regulatory reform. Our Oh Soo-young now tells us the details of the policy changes that will be applied on biomedical drugs and devices.
Korea's biomedical industry is one of the sectors that will cut red tape, as part of the package of reforms unveiled on Wednesday by the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety.
Korea still falls short of global regulatory standards, so we aim to mitigate barriers to R&D and marketization and create a globally competent biohealthcare ecosystem through support and counseling.
The ministry announced its plans to bolster the country's biomedical industry and widen public access to drugs, first by overcoming regulatory barriers in research and development. It will smoothen approval procedures in using embryos for stem cell medical treatments, as well as reducing various opportunity costs in developing in vitro diagnosis products. The ministry also aims to speed up the process of putting products on the market to fast-track supplies for patients in need. It hopes to cut down requirements on clinical trials for drugs used to treat life-threatening diseases, as well as those that can tackle sudden outbreaks and epidemics which can't be tested during development. Also, biopharmaceutical companies will be able to receive quality assessment for their products before they apply for authorization, saving up to 70 days in waiting. To help ramp up the industry's competitiveness on the global stage, the ministry will reclassify IT-based medical devices according to international standards and provide assistance for biomedical developers from manufacturing to marketization. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now shifting our focus, May 18, 1980, Gwangju, Korea. Ordinary citizens gave their lives to bring about democracy in this country. Our Kim Young-gil takes us to the southwestern city where special ceremonies were held to commemorate those who perished for what we have today.
Speaking at the ceremony in Gwangju, Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn said the May 18th democratic movement marked a watershed in Korea's democratic development that paved the way for a more free and just society.
We will also root out corruption and unreasonable customs to make our society more transparent by building on the spirit of the May 18th movement.
He also offered condolences to the victims' families. During the ceremony, a choir performed the signature song March for the Beloved, and participants were free to sing along as the spirit moved them. Leaders of the ruling and opposition parties joined in singing the song, while the Prime Minister remained silent. The signature song, popular with student activists in the 1980s, was sung by all participants at the ceremony starting in 1997. But since 2009, it has been performed by a choir following a decision by the conservative Lee Myung-bak administration. The practice has continued to this day despite calls from the opposition parties to make the singing of the song compulsory again. They say that to do otherwise damages the spirit of the democracy movement. Reflecting the controversy, the Minister of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, Park Seung-chun, was blocked from attending the event by relatives of people killed in the democracy movement. The ceremony was attended by roughly 3,000 people in all, including government officials, the families of democratic movement victims, and students. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now, for those of you not too familiar with Korea's modern history, our Shin Se-min highlights the significance of this day, what unfolded on May 18, 1980 in Gwangju.
It's a day remembered nationwide. For some, it evokes bitter memories. For others, honor. Marking the pro-democracy movement that took place on this day 36 years ago, most people are reflecting and reminiscing on the historic event that altered the political and social landscape of Korea. In 1980, public opposition to martial law led student activists in Gwangju to carry out a string of demonstrations, which triggered a clash with the military forces deployed by the authoritarian Chun Doo-hwan regime. This pro-democracy movement took root, making Gwangju the symbolic center for civic action, and now May 18th is widely remembered as the day that gave birth to democracy in a struggling nation.
It was worth the sacrifice. But to think that my friends and brothers are laid here, it's hard every time I come.
Visitors share one voice on this day, designated as a national day of commemoration in 1997 to sustain Korea's democracy and help move it in the right direction to ensure these sacrifices were not in vain. Here at the Bangwol-dong Memorial Cemetery, where the martyrs of the Gwangju pro-democracy movement are laid to rest, visitors create a stone tower to honor the spirits of those who have given their lives for the democracy of the nation. The building of the tower was once stalled for more than 2 decades, but resumed with public support and continues to take shape. And now, not only does it represent community, but also the united struggle and the spirit of democracy that Korea continues to benefit from today. With every stone added, the contributions of those who gave their lives are remembered, and the spirit of the movement is carried on to build a better nation. 신세민, Arirang News, Gwangju. Amid global concern that North Korea could conduct its 5th nuclear test ahead of its historic Party Congress earlier this month, the reclusive state did not press the button neither before nor during the convention. But Seoul says the Korean Peninsula is at a point where chances of another nuke test by the North cannot and should not be ruled out. Our Connie Kim fills us in on the need for stronger measures against the reckless regime.
The current situation on the Korean Peninsula is at a critical point where North Korea could push for a 5th nuclear test at any time. That's according to South Korea's Unification Minister Hong Yong-pyo during a conference in Seoul, who called for strong and stern response measures to induce change from North Korea. The minister also said Seoul had decided to impose stronger sanctions to Pyongyang's evolved provocations, mentioning how the North launched a long-range ballistic missile while the international community was discussing sanctions for its 4th nuclear test in January. South Korea isn't the only one keeping close watch on North Korea's nuclear threats. World leaders will also take up the issue at the G7 summit in Japan next week. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said the U.S. is confident North Korea's provocations will be addressed as the regime's destabilizing activities are a common cause of concern. Earnest emphasized Washington's continuous cooperation with the international community until the North is prepared to denuclearize and stop engaging in its provocative acts. Cooperation to respond against Pyongyang's nuclear provocations was also emphasized by U.S. Pacific Commander Admiral Harry Harris, who underscored the importance of trilateral military cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. Speaking at a security seminar in Washington on Tuesday, Harris said the North is posing a real threat with its pursuit of nuclear weapons and hundreds of thousands of rockets directed toward Seoul. To better respond to North Korea's growing missile threats, the 3 nations will conduct their first joint missile tracking exercise in Hawaii next month. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee for the U.S. presidential election, says he's willing to speak with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to curb the reclusive state's nuclear program. That's a change in tone by the presidential candidate, but is it something South Korea should take seriously? Our Kwon So-ah takes a closer look.
Picture Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un in the same room, thrashing out their differences. It might be difficult to imagine now, but it might happen if the presumptive Republican presidential nominee wins the White House in the fall. In an interview with Reuters, Trump expressed a willingness to talk with Kim if it would help get the regime to denuclearize. Trump said, quote, "I would speak to him. I would have no problem speaking to him." A different tone from his previous remarks about the North Korean leader when he called Kim a maniac and madman. It's also far from the Obama administration and South Korea's position that denuclearization must come before dialogue. So far, no incumbent U.S. president has had a one-on-one with their North Korean counterpart. Trump refused to elaborate on his specific North Korea policies, but said he would pressure China to help him find a way to deal with the regime. Many experts say Trump is in the middle of formulating his diplomatic policies, which once seemed to be focused solely on America's interests.
I think his foreign policy platform, along with his policy towards the Korean Peninsula, has not been finalized. So I think we have to wait and see how his platform in foreign policy is finalized and determined pretty much by the time the Democratic and the Republican Party convention is held at the end of July.
That's why experts say it is necessary to follow Trump's statements closely, but that it's not time to take him too seriously yet. 권소와, Arirang News.
Well, unbelievable, yes, but more cases of flawed fuel efficiency tests in vehicles. Japanese automaker Suzuki announced today that it's found discrepancies in its fuel and emissions testing. It's denied cheating, however. The scandal comes within hours of the president of another car maker, Mitsubishi, stepping down over that company's fuel scandal. Kim Mo-gyun has the details.
Osamu Suzuki, the CEO of Japan's fourth largest car manufacturer, has offered a public apology on Wednesday for using a different fuel efficiency testing method for 16 car models. He said that the testing method they used was not in line with official regulations in Japan, but said that new test results show that there was no need to modify the data.
We deeply apologize for not abiding by existing regulations when carrying out tests. However, we have been able to determine that our company's fuel efficiency results have no problems, and we have also notified the Ministry of Transport about our findings.
Suzuki said the improper testing method dated back to 2010 and that around 2.1 million vehicles in Japan have been affected. The latest news is causing a severe damage to the credibility on global car makers, as it comes just a month after Japan's Mitsubishi Motors accepted that it falsified fuel economy data for its vehicles for more than 2 decades. The firm's president Tetsuro Aikawa has announced that he will officially resign from his post next month. Last year, Germany's Volkswagen admitted that it used cheating devices on 11 million diesel vehicles to meet emission rules. Meanwhile, Korea has accused Japan's Nissan Motor earlier this week for manipulating emissions for its Qashqai diesel sport utility vehicles and called for a recall and suspension of sales. The carmaker, however, denied the allegations. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
The number of international students coming to Korea has been growing by the year, but they say there are legal obstacles in the way that make it difficult for them to find jobs after graduation and forcing many potential and valuable human talent to exit Korea. Well, it looks like things are about to change as the Korean government will kick off a new visa system next month that'll offer better and easier opportunities for international students to get a job here. Hwang Ho-jun has this story.
It's the missing link between visas for studying and working. The government's move to introduce a new visa system starting next month is intended to relax the requirements for issuing visas to international students, specifically those invited by the government under a scholarship program. The Ministry of Justice said the new work-study visa will allow international students to get a job in Korea as soon as they graduate from their respective schools.
Even students who already have been studying in Korea as part of the scholarship will have the opportunity to switch to this visa and take full advantage of it.
Under the current system, international students face many legal difficulties getting employed or acquiring a resident visa, which is considered by many as a waste of human resources.
So there are too many opportunities that actually are missing because we don't have the proper visa to get a job, even if it's a part-time job.
According to the Ministry of Justice, it hasn't been the easiest for an international student to land a job here in Korea. Some current requirements include companies to have at least 5 Korean employees for a foreign student to be able to apply. Also, the number of foreign staff members is not to exceed 20% of the total Korean staff. Under the new work-study visa, students like Ochika will be able to forego of requirements such as the ones mentioned above, and they will also receive an extension of 3 years instead of 2 every time they extend their visa.
Yeah, I'd be one of the first to apply, for sure.
The new system will also give international students the opportunity to stay longer in the country and contribute to the Korean economy while working in a local company. In addition, the government will create a D28 visa or a short-term student visa to minimize discomforts for students who are planning to take classes that only last a semester or 2. The government hopes the new visa program will not only attract more talented international students, but also offer a sound platform to improve their overall education as well. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
We reported last night of great news for Korean literature. Korean novelist Han Gang bringing home the 2016 Man Booker International Prize for her book The Vegetarian. Well, it's the first work to be translated into English, and the prize also recognized the translator, Deborah Smith's role. She was able to convey the story just as delicately as it was written in the original version, nothing lost in translation. Our Oh Jung-hee has more on Korean literature grabbing international spotlights and how translation plays a crucial role.
Korean novelist Han Gang and her translator Deborah Smith has won the 2016 Man Booker International Prize for Han's novel, The Vegetarian, on Monday. The prize honors a single work translated into English, and both the novelist and translator share a prize money of 50,000 British pounds or 72,000 US dollars. It's the first time a Korean literature work has been awarded the prestigious international prize, setting a milestone in the country's long literature history. While Korean is deemed as one of the most scientific languages in the world with only 28 characters in its alphabet, Korean literature has faced high language barriers in terms of translation. The Korean vocabulary is significantly extensive, with many words sharing similar meanings but delivering different nuances. So while the language's delicacy and subtlety provide lyricism in literary terms, it is at the same time extremely difficult to convey the exact meaning of a Korean work, either prose or verse, when translated into other languages. Thus, many highly recognized works in Korean have gone unnoticed among global literature circles. But that was not the case with The Vegetarian, as Smith's translation played a big role in Han winning the prize.
A novel must be translated as a novel, and that goes beyond merely switching from one language to another. Han has her original style of writing, and Smith was able to capture it and convey the author's sentences in a way that English readers could understand.
With The Vegetarian in the international spotlight, Korean literature has certainly captivated avid readers from around the world and who are already eager for more. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
It's almost become a daily routine, delivering news of poor air quality and high levels of fine dust in the air. And even if you do stay indoors as advised with your windows shut, you're not completely safe from fine dust, which of course raises health concerns. Well, welcome news for us all. A new study shows one type of houseplant can help filter the dust and remove harmful chemicals in the air. Our Kim Hye-sung brings us this report.
Fine dust is pumped into this box that contains a species of houseplant called Ardisia pusilla. After 3.5 hours, the concentration level of harmful particles falls from over 1,200 micrograms to well under 500 micrograms per cubic meter, a drop of more than 60%.
The plant's cuticle absorbs fine dust, and the stoma on the back of the leaf absorbs ultrafine dust, or dust known as PM 2.5, thereby filtering out airborne pollutants and toxic chemicals.
Green healing office is the term given to offices that fill more than 2% of the space with plants like this. In order to maximize the limited space, plants are attached to the wall with a filter that pumps clean air back into the office, just like an air purifier. And a growing number of offices in Korea are making use of these natural air filters. According to a company that provides green healing office services, the number of orders has increased over the last 3 years. One of them is this local government office in Seoul's Seodae-bungu district.
I heard these plants help purify the air, but at the same time they brighten our office, so they also create a more relaxing environment.
The rush to install these types of plants comes amid growing concerns about air quality in Korea, with a recent study ranking it as among the countries with the world's poorest air quality.
So if you're looking for something to help absorb fine dust and keep the air clean, you might want to try using some well-placed greeneries. It's simple and 100% natural. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
This week marks the centennial of the Sorokdo National Hospital, or Sorokdo Island, once home to the largest leper colonies in the world. 1 century later, the roughly 540 former leprosy patients there have begun to see light at the end of the tunnel. This is their story of finding peace and grace through abject sorrow and isolation. The final of my 2-part series. The church has an extra special place for all those living in Sorokdo Island. After generations of pain, suffering, and disdain, it's only through their religious faith that they've come to find peace, forgiveness, and hope to carry on their lives. After decades of isolation and brutality, today, life for more than 500 former lepers in Sorokdo Island is more or less serene. Every morning, they ride their motorized scooters to church. Most spend time at the church praying and reflecting. They attend Mass, sing hymns, and pray the best way they can with their disfigured bodies. Conducting the Mass for the people of Sorokdo is Father Kim Yeon-jun, the only Catholic priest on the island.
The lepers here had no reason to live. There were many suicide attempts, which is why religion became such an important part of their lives. Religious faith is the reason for life itself. It gives them something to look forward to, an afterlife that will compensate for the dreadful sufferings in this life.
But overcoming the indescribable anguish and dismay did not come easily, he adds. It would not have been possible without the sacrifice and dedication of 2 extraordinary grannies.
Most lepers here were abandoned by families in their teens when they most need a mother's care. And that's what they were, mothers from Austria. They never received a penny. They came to Korea when they were 25, 26 years old and spent 40 years on foreign land as pure volunteers, Marianne and Margaret.
Marianne Stöger and Margaret Pisser, fresh out of nursing school in Austria, left home in 1962 to serve leprosy patients in this tiny island, part of a country they only knew by name, Korea. When they arrived, there were 6,000 patients and 200 young children, and little in the way of medicines or staff to help them in their work.
Granny Marianne? I've never seen her because I'm blind, but I miss her dearly. Back then, life was very difficult here. We rarely had anything to eat. But every morning, Granny Marianne will come door to door and spoon-feed warm milk to all of us. Milk, clothes, socks.
Marianne and Margaret brought huge changes to our lives. When no one else wanted to touch our wounds, even with gloves on, they treated our bleeding wounds with their bare hands. They came and touched us, took care of us like no other had ever before. One time, I was infected with tetanus and almost died. Sister Marianne took me to her own care and nursed me day and night, and I lived.
And one day in 2005, when they turned 70 years old, Marianne and Margaret just picked up and left, without farewells, only with a single suitcase they came with 4 decades earlier. In memory and appreciation of the decades of love and service they received, the people of Sorokdo decided to preserve the two grannies' house just the way they left behind.
여기가 이제 40년간 이 공간에 머물렀죠. 그냥 소박하게 이 모습 이대로예요. 살던 방 이대로. 그냥 똑같이 사랑하신 무에도 그렇게 아주 소박하게 이렇게 사셨죠.
Through the love and sacrifice of these grannies and decades of despair and sorrow, the lepers here tell me the days of isolation and fear are fading. Years of neglect have been followed by peace and dignity. This 4-kilometer pathway circling the island along the seaside was built in 1938 by then leprosy patients living on this island. They had 20 days to complete this guardway with nothing but picks, shovels, and their bare, wounded hands. It's a painful reminder of the agony and suffering that they had to go through, but nearly 8 decades later, the islanders have named this way the way to healing.
I don't think it's right to feel sorry for the people of Sorokdo, to look at them with pity. I hope they can be perceived as brave survivors who overcame their tremendous pain and sorrow and found peace and grace, who can provide consolation to the rest of the world.
Because small wounds are healed when they meet big wounds. The Japanese Olympic Committee plans to investigate the bidding for the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo over allegations of corruption. Bruce Harrison is live in the studio with me. Bruce, tell us about this latest development.
Sure, Kanyang. Well, the committee is investigating members that were involved in the bid, probably likely in hopes of putting to rest these allegations that payments made to a consulting firm were corrupt. According to the Guardian newspaper, the bid team deposited more than $2 million into a Singapore bank account, reportedly linked to the son of former disgraced international athletics chief President Lamine Diack. Opposition lawmakers have called the consulting firm Black Tidings a paper company. The committee denies any wrongdoing.
Consultants in this industry are often individual business people who often use their homes as their business addresses because they are traveling around the world.
Lamine Diack is being investigated by French police for corruption at the International Association of Athletics Federations while he was president. Pro-democracy protesters marched in Hong Kong amid a visit by a top-ranked Chinese official. Zhang Dejiang, who is in charge of Hong Kong and Macau affairs, is the first senior official to visit Hong Kong since violent protest in 2014. Many citizens there called Wednesday for greater autonomy in the Chinese-ruled city. Some are even calling for independence from the mainland.
He is not welcome by the Hong Kong people because we want true democracy. We want the true election.
Thousands of policemen were deployed to meet the protest, which have so far seen a number of scuffles between police and protesters.
Well, Bruce, the protesters are frustrated over the city's or the government's lack of political reform in the city. Is Zhang expected to appease them in any way?
Well, so far today, he attended an economic forum where he spoke, but he has promised to listen to citizens' concerns about the city's relationship with China, and that even includes meeting with representatives of the pro-democracy movement.
Right, and many have criticized Zhang's plans to meet with this pro-democracy leaders as tokenistic, so we'll have to see what materializes from that.
Exactly.
All right, Bruce, thank you so much for that coverage.
My pleasure.
Well, summer is definitely here. It was a very hot day, but the mercury is expected to soar even more in the upcoming days. So for more, let's go over to our Lee Ji-hyun at the Weather Center. Ji-hyun.
Yes, Ganyang, it was very hot, but I would say it wasn't that uncomfortable as there was relatively low humidity, but strong UV rays and high levels of ozone weren't welcomed at all.
Right, you're absolutely right. It wasn't that uncomfortable, but I hear it's going to feel like midsummer tomorrow, so Jihyun, spring is virtually over, isn't it?
Well, not yet, I would say, but for tomorrow, temperatures will rise to 30s in many parts of the country, with the highs in the capital, Gwangju, soaring to 32 degrees Celsius. And sunny skies and very strong UV rays will continue to dominate the sky, and fine dust levels will also go up to relatively high levels in the western parts of the country during the morning hours. And moving on to tomorrow's temperature readings, the daily low here in Seoul will start off at 16 degrees Celsius, while Daegu will kick off at 14. And as for the daily highs, Seoul will soar to 32 degrees Celsius, while Daegu and Daejeon will peak at 31 and 30 respectively. Now, it's not summer yet, but the unseasonably hot temperatures will continue until Sunday. Then early next week, we have rain in the forecast, which will cool things down a bit. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
We remember and honor all those who sacrificed their lives to lay the foundation for democracy that we enjoy today. It's also a reminder of how incredibly young Korea's democracy is, just 36 years today, what we need to do to nurture and foster what we have. Well, that is our broadcast on this Wednesday night. I'm Moon Gon-young. Hope you enjoyed our show tonight. For our viewers in other parts of the world, have a good one. For those of you in Korea and across Asia, a good night from Seoul.